Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I am Dr. Jeffrey Sterling, Surgeon General for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and on behalf of our General President, Brother Dr. Willis Lonzo III, welcome to the first Surgeon General Initiative webinar of the new year. Today we're going to be talking about family fit lifestyle, but we're going to have a conversation between myself and Deputy Surgeon General Brother Dr. Victor Narcisse. I think you're going to find this enjoyable and hope that you give us plenty of comments and questions, which we'll be happy to get to. As we get started, we're going to do things a little bit different because we'll just be having a conversation tonight. You know me as Surgeon General of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, but I think to put this conversation in context, one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing, in addition to my over 25 years of clinical practice as an emergency physician, I run a healthcare consulting company that has literally done work around the world implementing best practices in terms of public health, clinical medicine, administrative, financial, and operational considerations. So very pleased to do that. And that is actually relevant in the context of what we'll be doing today, because one of the things that I am particularly keen on trying to get accomplished right now is through SIMCO, which stands for Sterling Initiatives Managed Preventive Care Organization, which is an initiative that aims to be America's first managed public health practice. So we're going to be looking to have people focus on staying ready so you don't have to get ready, implementing the notion that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and transforming our community in particular away from the paradigm that you use the emergency department as your portal of entry into healthcare, but that we start to embrace things that will increase the longevity and the quality of our lives. So with that, let me bring on the Deputy Surgeon General for Family Health, Brother Dr. Victor Narcisse. Good evening.
Good evening, brother. Again, my name is Brother Victor Narcisse. I'm an internal medicine physician and a geriatric physician, practicing in the Houston Medical Center, Texas Medical Center, Houston Methodist Hospital. And my background has been in the care of individuals who are hospitalized, who are acutely ill. But my training has always been in the areas of primary care. My background has today we'd like to talk more about that and about how to bring prevention to your life, particularly at this time of the year when everyone is so motivated and interested in making change that will be durable for their lives. In my sphere, lots of individuals will make New Year's resolutions. And I see this on a regular basis. I hear about it. The first week of work back after the holidays, everyone wants to talk about their New Year's resolution. I'm actually not a believer in New Year's resolutions. It's a tradition that's thousands of years old, goes all the way back to the Babylonians. But what I find is that many of the promises that are made at the beginning of January don't make it to the beginning of February amongst my colleagues. And so I'm actually a bigger fan of trying to develop goals that will be durable and changes that will work for your lives. So I'd love to hear more about Dr. Sterling. How are you a person who makes changes and sets goals?
Well, I love the concept of productivity. And I begin every conversation about doing things with that in mind. I don't necessarily set goals. Again, you'll hear me when I talk in certain phrases and, based on, one of my books, my staff either calls them 72-hour isms. We'll talk about their 72 hours in a day later. We'll talk about that, but they also call it stuff Jeff says, not quite in that phrase, but I say that to mean that every time there's a task in front of me, I literally begin with the end in mind. So knowing what to do or even having a goal isn't as much the issue for me as figuring out what the best way is to accomplish a given goal. So it's not just the goal, but it's the implementation of the goal that gets it done. And if health is the conversation that we're having, this actually makes it quite enjoyable because health is not as much of a fantasy or conundrum as people make it out to be. There really are basic principles that can be applied family to family. So my approach to these things is if I have a goal, I say, okay, what's the outcome that I'm trying to produce with this goal? And then I will literally work backwards, tracing steps, and then move forward after I have looked at what are the best practice steps that allow me to implement this as rapidly as possible. In other words, as we say in the emergency department, cheating is good. I'm not trying to be right, I'm trying to get it right. So that's how I approach these things. I want to get stuff off my plate as quickly as I possibly can so that I can keep things moving. But no, you don't get up. No, don't move forward because you, in your capacity, have the same journey. So I'm going to take this question and throw it right back at you. How do you approach goals? I think it's very interesting.
I'm a person who has lofty goals like everyone does, but I often find that the best way to eat the elephant is one bite at a time. And I really try to take the large projects, the large visions that I have, that my boss has, that my patients have. And I try to break it into smaller goals. I use a phrase in my head that's often used in planning called SMART goals, goals that are specific. So what is it that you're trying to do? And I try to be very, very precise around that. And the more specificity I can give to the goal, the better. It has to be something that's meaningful to you. I can't really, at this stage in my life, I can't execute goals that others bring to me that don't mean very much to me. So I have to really find some specific rationale, some specific benefit for it. It's got to be action items. And so I have to sort of identify very, very precisely an A, a B, a C that I'm going to do to try to achieve the goal. And that goal has to be very realistic. The goal, when I come to the project, my goal is to lose 40 pounds, or my goal is to make $500 million. Those are not the kinds of things that really ever work. And so instead, if I say I'm going to exercise, I'm going to do it between 5:30 and 6, and I'm going to do it because I'm trying to improve my endurance, and I'm going to take this step and then that one, the other one, and I'm going to do this over the next 6 months, and then reevaluate my goal, or even over the next 6 weeks and reevaluate my progress. Those are the kinds of things that I find more helpful to me, because I can then track my progress and identify the not just the where I am as interim, but where I am in terms of the overall.
So let me jump back in there, because one of the things that I would say to the listening audience who really wants to quantify what we've just said and put it into practice is that I often speak in terms of some of our activity and how it appears to me as being akin to a butterfly fluttering around aimlessly, hoping to find something to pollinate. One of the things that you'll hear me saying often is a fantasy without a plan really isn't worth having. And, what we're talking about now fits into that same category. You really have to have a plan. And, whether you call it a project plan, I work in terms of implementation matrices, you really have to quantify what the parts of that 800-pound elephant is that you're trying to eat, and break it down into those 800 bite-sized pieces and figure out how to swallow again and again and again. And as we transition over into a conversation about health, we just want people to realize that too often people begin a journey and begin by flooring the pedal, to use an analogy, at 100 miles an hour, and that's just not sustainable. When we get into talking about diet and health, people need to be aware that diets don't necessarily work nearly as much as lifestyle changes do. And part of your plan really needs to be deciding how you can put in place those things that will be sustainable over the long term. So have a plan. Begin with the outcome in mind. Learn how to implement what it is you're trying to do. And I think that, in short, for me, that is how I approach goals and try to achieve outcomes.
Do you find that there's a value in developing accountability partnerships with others, whether it's your spouse, significant other, your work colleagues?
I mean, there's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than that. No one wants to be alone on a journey. I think that friendships relationships, professional colleagues. You know, the things that you do with others create bonds that are stronger. When you have accountability partners, whether it's getting something done at work, as you mentioned, there are things that you don't want to do that you have a harder time with doing. Well, having an accountability partner is a sure way to have someone who tries to motivate you to get across the finish line. Alternatively, in the sphere of exercise, well, a workout buddy at the gym is a very good thing. Someone who can push you past your points that you would consider doing on your own. So, absolutely, yes. If you can find someone to carry you along on a journey, that not only helps you finish the journey, it actually creates bonds that will be meaningful for you in terms of production of the invisible components of your health downstream.
So you brought up the idea of exercise, and again, January is the time of the year when all the gyms are filled with individuals that were not there in December. All of the parks are full. Um, I find that this time of year, lots of people are trying to set and achieve activity goals, and I struggle with these on a regular basis. The constant conversation that I have in my life is as a busy practitioner and parent is how do I find the time? And uh, most of my patients tell me I would only exercise more if I had more time. Um, when you hear that from your patients, what kinds of responses do you share with them?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I'm big on a lot of this. I think that the phraseology for these things is absolutely horrible. So I don't talk about exercise. I talk about activity. And as an internist, again, I'll say this in the way that you can appreciate. When you talk about exercise, people think about packing a bag, having a gym membership, having to travel a certain amount of miles to get to where it is you're going, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot involved in exercise. When we talk about activity, first of all, I want to share with the audience the notion that any level of activity above your baseline actually strengthens your heart and improves your cardiovascular performance. So when you think of activity instead of exercise, then I can tell you that any activity that you do can produce cardiovascular benefits. So instead of feeling like you have to get up and go to the gym, guess what? You can take a walk around your block. And if we're talking about family fit health, part of what we'll be talking about in promoting habits, healthy habits for your family, is grab your significant other, grab your kids, toss a ball around the house, toss a frisbee, take a walk around the block for 20 or 30 minutes. These activities actually don't require all of the additional activity of exercise, but they are equally as productive in producing benefit to your heart. So if you migrate, and again, this is a journey. So as you begin to embrace activity, here's another thing for you. Instead of being a couch potato watching football on Sundays, that's a perfect time to get on a treadmill at home if you have one. One thing that I'm known to do is anytime you're talking to me on the phone, I guarantee you I have just jumped up out of my seat and I am doing moderate intensity activity by pacing around my house. So when I'm on the phone, I'm walking 3.5, 4 miles an hour. I get activity in every opportunity I get. So I want to diffuse the notion that in order for you to lose weight or to become more healthy, that you have to wait until New Year's Eve, make a big hullabaloo about joining a gym. Now, doing those things are absolutely fantastic, but there are ways in which you can produce and promote health with activity and build yourself up to the point to where when you're really ready to make that commitment of a lifestyle change, then you can add additional things, including that gym membership and a personal trainer. Once again, bad name. I prefer lifestyle coach because I don't want you to have a personal trainer who just sits there and works you out. I want someone that empowers you and teaches you how to learn how to do these things for yourself. So there are different phrases that we can use, and all of this also folds into the idea of metabolism. I'm big on this concept of invisible health, the things that you can do that actually create cardiovascular benefits for you, even while you aren't working out. So I want you to get into the mindset of activity. Exercise will take care of itself. So think about as you're sitting here, what is it that I could be doing to engage in activity that strengthens my cardiovascular status. And there's a lot that you actually can do.
I firmly agree with that. Um, as some of you have heard in these previous discussions, I've been on a health journey that really started with COVID. Before COVID, I was a couch potato, and because I work in a hospital, because where I sit right now is inside my hospital's COVID unit, I really felt that I was worried about um, a need to maximize my uh, activity, my exercise, my endurance, so that I could sustain and bear whatever blows the infections might bring along. So I have been um, exercising on a much more regular basis, and the exercise that I enjoy the most is road cycling outside. The challenge for me is that um, from where I live or where I work to the place where I most enjoy to ride is a half an hour to an hour of preparation. So it obviously doesn't allow for an everyday activity. So I've really had to supplement the road cycling that I've enjoyed the most with other things. And one of the easy pieces is that in my job I walk fairly prolifically, and I've actually just started to keep track of that. My phone has like I suspect almost everybody's phone has a step counter, and I actually just focus on that step count every day. And at the end of the day, if my step count isn't where I'd like it to be, I actually just take an opportunity to take the long way around to the parking lot, or uh, a longer path from point A to point B, so that I can increase my step count. Now, is that something that's going to change the couch potato into an Adonis? No, it's not. But that's not the goal. The goal is to try to increase my activity level, and so I think that's one of the things that has been helpful to me. And, go ahead.
No, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please finish your point because I wanted to acknowledge some of the comments.
And so one of the things that I have tried to do is actually keep track of that. And a pencil and paper is a great way to do that. One of the methods that I have chosen is to use the measurements that are in my phone. I've got an app, I've got a computer, and I can keep track of these things. It happens automatically. And once a week, once a month, I actually will develop a report and try to get a sense of where am I compared to my goals. And once I've been achieving my goals, one of the things that I found very, very helpful is to change my goal. In my cycling, if you're a real biker, or a real cyclist, you would know that where I'm starting with it's really not a credible place to be for the year. But I started with, wow, can I cycle 100 miles over the course of the whole year? A person who's cycling 5,000 miles is just laughing about this.
Yeah.
But that was my goal, and I realized fairly quickly I was able to achieve that goal, and I able to get it in a month or so. And so I just changed the goal, and I changed the goal. The goal went from 100 miles to 250 miles to 500 miles to 1,000 miles. And the rapid cycle between evaluating the goal and achieving a goal and then setting a new goal is something that I actually find very emotionally rewarding. That I've achieved that goal, I'm setting a new one, and I'm going to work towards that, and I think I can do that.
Yes, your journey is really pretty fantastic. I hope the brothers are paying attention because I really love the way that you've embraced your activity during the period of COVID, and we're going to continue to come back to that. There are a couple of things that brothers are saying that really are important and right on spot, so I want to acknowledge two comments in particular. First of all, yes, brother Carl Phillips, exercise, the specific standard is 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise, which translates into 30 minutes a day of cardio 5 times a week. If you're doing that, you are exactly on point, and there are just so many benefits that you will enjoy. So kudos to you. Keep doing that. Brother Keith Dunn, one thing that I talk about all the time is a concept called 5-minute efficiency. Now, this is extrapolable to everything from relationships to health to productivity at work, but it's also applicable to your health. You don't have to make a big to-do about these things, and we'll talk about this when we get to the exercise session. In order to produce the type of benefit that will help your heart, or if you're into weight loss, help you lose weight, it doesn't have to be these big, grandiose efforts, all of which are fine and good. Continue to do those things. But 5-minute efficiency really grabs small, bite-sized um, things that you can do to continually create accomplishment. And as Brother Dr. Narcisse said, there are things that you don't want to do, and maybe a better way to eat the elephant is to chew very small pieces of the less tasty parts of the elephant and then continually come back to it. So what I mean by that is kind of like if you are doing cardio, moving back and forth from cardio to weight training and other things, integrating all of it in. So if you happen to be keen on running, for example, but you hate weightlifting, but you don't have to do all cardio, then all weightlifting. You can get in little bite-sized portions of it, but always continue to do something. That is a key component of efficiency, and that'll keep things moving for you. So yes, small goals, small steps. If let's stop talking about the elephant and talk about what it would take for you to do a 5-minute plank if that was something you wanted to do to get your six-pack back. So I guarantee you're not going to start with a 5-minute plank. You're going to start with a 10-second or a 20-second, which will be plenty all by itself the first time you do it. But if you continue to do it, you will see that it sets the foundation for ongoing productivity upon which you can build, be more productive. And here's something for you, Dr. Narcisse, to dislike it less. We tend to like the things that we're good at and that come to us easy. But in our professional lives in particular, we all are faced with things that we have to do. So one way to diffuse them is to turn those weaknesses or dislikes into strengths and eventually things that you enjoy because you're better at them.
So here is my yoga mat. It's here in my office because I was struggling to get my isometric exercise done at home. And I didn't want to do it while I was watching TV. And what I found is that there's a whole series of times when I have an opportunity in my office day that I could actually just take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and do those isometric exercises. And so I think that there are lots of ways to incorporate it into your regular day that isn't such a, I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm going to get dressed in this special outfit. And I'm going to go and I'm going to go to this special place. And I'm going to do this special activity. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to begin my day. If you can do that and you can do that consistently and perpetuate it over long periods of time, more power to you. But that's not what works in my life, and that certainly hasn't. That's not how I got to the couch potato position in the first place, for sure.
Let me make one more point on this before we move on to the next topic. And this is something that I think that brothers can identify with. There's a lot of people out there that are wearing Apple Watches or some other type of Fitbit contraption. Gamifying your life, objectifying your goals is a surefire way to get instant feedback on your accomplishments. Dr. Narcisse was talking about, writing it down on paper. He's old school, I guess, still using computers and the rest of that. This thing gives me feedback all day, every day. It literally is telling me to stand for 1 minute out of every hour, which is a specific outcome that translates into a specific component of the health, the lifestyle that you should have. It tells me how many steps I walk per day. It actually told me that last year I walked 9,600 steps every single day for an entire year, which kind of blew my mind when I knew I was doing it, but to see it objectified is something. So if you can get something that gamifies your life, especially your health life, gives you monthly challenges. This thing gives me monthly challenges every single month. That is a very good way to get into it, to see if you can rise to the occasion, whether you're talking about calories, activities, workouts. It actually does all of that. So think about that and try to get yourself a watch. We talked about an accountability partner. There's no reason why your Fitbit or Apple Watch can't serve that function as well.
I actually use those devices. I have a Garmin computer specifically for my bike, and there's a whole set of metrics that I achieve with that. And every time I I obtain one of the goals that are set, it actually gives me a little token and a little piece. And um, the cycle of setting a goal and then achieving the goal and then finding some recognition for that goal is something that is very satisfying to the brain, and it brings the sense of accomplishment and achievement that we don't get otherwise. And what a lot of people struggle with is that they set this goal. I'm gonna lose 40 pounds over the next year, and it's such a lofty goal, it's such an unattainable goal that they lose interest because they realize that they haven't gotten to 40 pounds, and they didn't realize that the goal wasn't 40 pounds. The goal was increase your activity and modify your diet so that you can lose 1 to 2 pounds in a week. That's actually the kind of goal that leads to sustainable weight loss, if that's the thing that you're trying to achieve. So most people struggle because they set the goals inappropriately, and then they can never live up to these inappropriately set goals. We struggle with that all the time in my workspace. And because when patients come into the hospital, we'll ask them, what are you doing? And I'll further the question of what was your goal? And they tell me some goals like, well, hey, I was going to lose 100 pounds. Well, that sounds great. You need to lose 100 pounds. Maybe I need to lose 100 pounds too. But a 100-pound goal is not something that folks will ever find meaningful, because you'll never wake up one morning and say, hey, I just lost 100 pounds this past week or past month. That doesn't work. So I think you have to incorporate the activity in your life. You have to regularly achieve goals, regularly set goals, regularly be rewarded for those goals.
I want people, I want to challenge you on your last point, which is actually true. I'm not disagreeing with it, but I'm actually going to ask people to aspire to eat that 800-pound elephant, to lose the 100-pound, because if you need to, you need to. So, another of the things that you'll hear me say is the reason you aren't a billionaire is because you don't have a $1 billion plan, right? There are plans. Again, there are best practices for everything. There is a path to lose that 100 pounds should you choose to do so. I think the point that you're making is that don't expect to wake up one day and see 100 pounds fall off unless you went to see a plastic surgeon. But again, slow and steady wins the race. I want you to achieve grandiose, visionary things. I want you to aim high. And guess what? If you have a 100-pound goal and you only gain 50 pounds, we're still going to say congratulations. So I don't want to dissuade anyone from shooting for the stars, because your goal should be set on what is practical, not in terms of accomplishable at the beginning, but what's necessary for your health. There are actually some people out there whose lives depend on them losing 100 pounds, and they need to be prodded into making that commitment. It's going to take time. And I get the point that you're making in terms of saying that you really have to be moderate about how you approach these things. But what I want you to do is I want you to realize everything is accomplishable if you put in place the appropriate plan to accomplish it. That's why I say cheating is good. If you Google right now how to lose 100 pounds, you'll find there are plenty of answers out there as to how to do it. Find out what's implementable and very systematically attack it and go for it. Because as right on cue, I tell you, you're going to get Carl Phillips up here. You should have short-term as well as long-term goals. Part of an implementation matrix or project plan means that phase 1 means doing this part of the goal as you continue all the way up to phase 5, after which theoretically you will have done what you need to do. We can talk about goals all night, brother Narcisse. We have a lot of other stuff to talk about.
We have, since weight loss is such a common goal this time of year, what types of exercise do you find most helpful in terms of beginning a weight loss journey? At the beginning.
Yes. You stepped into my trap, my friend. I'm going to say two things, and this actually, just by way of introduction, I have a book that's being published on February 1st, and one of the, I'll paraphrase, the topic basically is that diet is 75% of the conversation. So if your question is, how do I begin? Not that one, that's the efficiency book, but the upcoming book is titled Straight No Chaser Health, empowering you to obtain longevity and a better quality of life. And the answer to your question when it comes to weight loss, Diet is literally 75% of the weight loss equation. And there is math that actually speaks to that being the point. Literally 75% of what you must do is to adjust your diet. You cannot out exercise a bad diet. Okay. All the things that you do, if you actually look at what the American Heart Association, what the CDC and other entities, Department of Health and Human Services, tell you about exercise. If you actually spent 1 hour involved in moderate intensity exercise at about 3.5 miles an hour for an entire hour, you're going to burn about 233 calories. Okay. In order to lose 1 pound, you need to burn roughly the equivalent of about 3,500 calories, which means you have to create a deficit of 500 calories every day for a week just to lose 1 pound, with apologies to the adjustments that need to be made for your metabolism. So if you spend all that time walking for 1 hour a day and have only burnt 233 calories, guess what? You're going to have to stop. You're going to have to get rid of the rest of the calories by stopping your bad habits with diet. Just to give you a quick example, you want to create a calorie deficit all day, every day of 500, get rid of 3 cans of Coke. That's 150 calories per can. Substitute the Coke for water. Boom, you've just accomplished that. But see, when I talk about, there's two parts to this conversation. There's weight loss and there's health. We must not lose sight of health promotion, which is going to create longevity of life. Okay. Now, weight loss does that as well because weight produces more stress on your heart, which subsequently has to work harder. But if you want to lose weight at the beginning of the conversation, you need to get your diet in order because you cannot out exercise a bad diet. But to your point, if I'm going to, because we'll talk about diet, I'm sure. If we're talking about exercise, start with activity. Get that in your head. The conversation is on activity. Whatever it is you aren't doing right now, as the brother said, just get yourself in the habit of committing to walk somewhere at some rate for 30 minutes a day. You already have 30 minutes in a day where you can pace back and forth in your house, whether you're on the phone watching sports or engaged in an actual exercise type activity. Start there. And as you get in better shape, things will unfold before you to where you can now go from a 3.5 mile per hour walk to a 7 to 8 mile an hour run. These things will happen sequentially, but to start the process, just be active. It burns calories. Everything you do will help you.
So, Brother Sterling, I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana.
Oh, here we go. Great food.
This is a regular part of the conversation. The food does not get better than in New Orleans, Louisiana. The problem is that all the food that is so good in New Orleans, Louisiana, that I grew up loving, that people travel from around the world to enjoy, is not necessarily a great thing for my longevity. And so I've had to, through my professional life, really relearn a lot of the habits that I obtained growing up. And so when I look at a diet or a nutrition plan, this is the time of year when people are looking at that. It's very intimidating. Where do I start? Where do I even begin? It's a question that I actually had from a patient this week.
I don't do opinions, okay? And everything that you ever will hear me say is verifiable, and I try to promote best practices, standards of care, and things that are verifiable. Let's objectify the conversation. For purposes of your health and purposes of weight loss, the closer you get to a plant-based diet, the healthier you're going to be. The better portion control you're going to have, the better your diet is actually going to end up being. Okay? So I am quite sure, and I'm from Chicago, which only does a hat tip to my good friends in New Orleans, by the way, in terms of cuisine. But as these things go, the chefs in Chicago and New Orleans are just as lovely in creating healthy cuisine as they are creating fat, juicy, delicious meals as well. So if you just do a little bit of work, you can be creative. But also, again, I try to be the message. I often joke and say, be wary in trusting a fat doctor or a skinny chef. Okay, and what I mean by that is that, look, I am actually going to walk the walk. And I am telling you, as I sit here, if I ever ended up on death row or some other place where they ask me for my last meal, it's going to be a deep dish pizza from Chicago. And I say that to mean that you cannot become Puritan in your health journey because quality of life has to be a companion to pursuing longevity of life. So if you choose to continue to enjoy the marvelous cuisine of New Orleans, Chicago, and other such places, you simply will have to incorporate that into your plan. So if I say once a month, I am really going to enjoy this, don't do it guilt free. I do not believe in cheat meals or any other nonsense. If you want that to be your life, make that your life. But objectify the conversation, quantify the calories that you're taking, quantify the effects of omega-6, the bad fatty acids that you may be eating, and then create a workout and diet plan around that that actually still helps you achieve your workout and your diet goals. So you don't have to, I want to disavow the notion that you have to punish yourself to become a Puritan in order to be healthy. You have to be creative. You have to accommodate the things that will stimulate you and motivate you, not reward you. I don't want to get into food as a reward because that sends the wrong signals to your brain. But you can still have a high quality life all the while having pursuit of health.
Could you speak to the concepts of um, food portion size and how quickly or how slowly you eat and the beneficial or negative effects of those?
Okay, see, it's all about phrases with me. I don't know when I got this way or why I'm this way, but this stuff actually works. To everyone in the audience, if you have not heard the phrase healthy eating plate, please Google it. Please learn it. There is literally a way in which your plate should look if you are trying to eat healthy. Half of just, and this comes from the Harvard School of Public Health, go Crimson, by the way. Half of your plate should be comprised of fruits and vegetables. As a matter of fact, for a long period of time, I've been eating fruits as my dessert. It's actually quite delicious and a hell of a lot more healthy than that piece of cake, which I eat whenever I feel like it. I just have grown to the point to where I actually prefer having grapes and other such things. So half of your plate really should be fruits and vegetables. Your food, your meat portions, and by the way, when I say meat, you should be aware that anything processed, hamburgers, hot dogs, sausages, it is known to cause cancer. Okay, so stay away from any type of processed foods as much as you possibly can, folks. This is not a good thing. You should be aware of this. Your food portion, and by the way, I'm a semi-vegetarian, which, believe it or not, actually means that I get to eat chicken, turkey, and fish. Which, by the way, like I said, if I go to Chicago and I want to eat a deep dish sausage and Canadian bacon pizza from Giordano's, I am going to do that. But all day, every day, my choices are to go healthy. So you need somewhere around a quarter of your meal to represent that. And then the rest of it includes things that are colored or brown. Stay away from white rice, stay away from white breads. Those things don't provide you with the appropriate portions of foods that are good for you. And then, of course, we haven't said this yet, and I'm amazed that we got this far in the conversation without stressing this point, but water, 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 water. Okay, the closer you get to drinking clear water, the healthier your life's going to be. It's 60% of your body weight, folks, and it is essential to life. And everything else that you're doing is, everything you put in your mouth is either going to help you or hurt you. So at some point in time, embrace the things that are going to help you. But you have to learn. Thank you, Dr. Martin, for putting the healthy food plate up, healthy eating plate. You have to learn how to eat. And believe me when I tell you, this doesn't mean that you have to stop eating good foods or enjoying what you eat. Just learn what actually works and then become proficient enough at cooking or having your meals prepared for you so that you're still being healthy while in pursuit of health. It's not that hard. You just have to be mindful in trying to pursue it. What's your approach to these things? Do share.
Um, it's been an ongoing struggle, and again, I'm a busy person, and I start with essentially habits that my forebears necessarily uh, gave to me that were not necessarily always the best. But um, uh, one of the things that one of the first steps I did was that I'm a busy person. I'm going to skip lunch. Well, when I skip lunch, then you know what happens next. You go to the vending machine. So many years ago, I was able to take that first step. I made a commitment to myself that I was going to eat a small lunch every day, and I was going to never eat any food out of the vending machine. And in all deference to the people who take the quarters and the dollars, and it's good business. I understand that, but it's not necessarily good for me. And so I made a conscious choice to do that first. And then the next phase of things that I've tried to do is, okay, now that I've decided not to skip meals, what's the composition of the meal? And am I finding something in the healthy eating plate? You can bring this point up. Do I have something that's a grain and something that's a vegetable? And I've tried to increase those portions. Is there something that's a green leafy vegetable? Now I'm at the place where I have a green leafy vegetable for every lunch meal, at least 2 or 3 meals a day. I'm going to have one portion that's a green leafy vegetable. At the beginning of my COVID journey, that was not necessarily the case, and there were more processed foods. And I've tried to specifically bring my journey further and further away from processed foods, and it's a struggle. One of the challenges that I found to be very helpful, but difficult for me in my lifestyle, is preparing the foods at home. The more food that I eat out, the more difficulties I tend to have, because the kinds of food choices that I make when I'm not eating at home are less advantageous. Now, there are alternative choices to be made, and I think that I'm trying to learn, and as I go through my journey, try to get better at making choices when I'm eating out. But I find it easier to eat well when I'm eating at home.
Let me jump back in there, because one of the things that I want to share in the attempt to objectify this conversation, remember I told you that I like to cheat. So I took a test 2 days ago to find out what my life expectancy is. And believe it or not, my life expectancy is 100 years old, which is crazy for a black man in America, but that's a different conversation. And, I've actually done quite a bit of research on what's called blue spaces. And, there are researchers that have looked around the world at people that actually live to 100 years old to objectify the conversation and find out what things they had in common. You know what they weren't doing? They weren't going to the gym and working out every day. So once again, that's not to say that going to the gym is a bad thing. It's just saying that you don't have to do it. But in the conversation about diet and exercise, there are things that they did do that we have access to. And in terms of foods, you don't necessarily have to eat 3 meals a day. But if you do, remember this phrase: breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. And we can get into what some of that means and how that may actually be true or not. But another thing that is being done is that 3 meals a day may not even be the ideal way to eat. Having smaller meals 5 or 6 times a day may be an even better way to eat, because when you're hungry, you're going to tend to eat more. And when you take smaller meals, you're more likely to eat something healthy. So in between your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if you had a bowl of grapes, for example, one time, and you had a handful of some of the healthier nuts, cashews, almonds, walnuts, that actually makes your meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, less inclined to be bigger, which means that you're going to be better off over the course of the day. The other thing that you mentioned that I want to help with is the entire idea of eating fast foods or eating out. People need to learn the concept of meal planning. Okay? You can literally prepare all of your meals at home over the weekend and take them with you and put them in a refrigerator at work, so that when you do skip a meal and skip lunch, you aren't tempted by going to the vending machine or to the fast food place. You can simply pull out a prepared healthy meal that is already there and meets the standards that you want. So this takes planning, this takes forethought, this takes preparation, but you actually can get it done.
Yeah, there's for the geriatric literature, when you study centenarians, people who live to 100, you often find this type of eating habit. And so it's one of the things that I've begun to incorporate into my own journey. I'm now very purposeful in stopping my eating process after a certain amount of the meal's been consumed. Whereas historically, I'd fill a plate, eat the whole plate, because I don't know when I'm going to get back to eating, and I don't have time to stop and eat regularly. So instead, what I've tried to do is exactly as you point out, is to limit the amount that I'm consuming at this time, I'm going to come back to eating an hour or 2 hours later. And what I have found, and what the literature around centenarians implies, is that in taking this small frequent meal approach, the amount of calories consumed over the course of the entire day is actually reduced. And there's a fairly substantial literature around the centenarians and a reduction in their overall calorie intake. And so that speaks to what you talked about earlier, that you can't out exercise a bad diet. And when I was a kid, during Lent, the Catholic holiday right before Easter, there was always a time when we'd give up things. And in high school, the thing that we'd always give up was a can of Coke. And that was such a big sacrifice at the time.
Yeah.
And that was actually the time I actually figured out there's a lot of calories in this thing.
150 calories.
And one of the things that I learned when I started getting on my bike, and I learned it in a very personal way, man, I'd go out, I'd go 45 minutes, go an hour, spend a lot of time, really felt like I was doing something, and you look at the number of calories consumed, and it's not that great in many respects. And so really, if you're going to make this journey, the amount and the way that you eat is a really critical part of it. And it's something that has been an ongoing struggle for me, and it's something that I've tried to incorporate as part of my journey. And I'm not going to be the one that tells you that I have all the answers. I'm going to be the one to tell you, glean the knowledge that I've been obtaining from the literature and from my own personal experiences. Not that I have all, that I've achieved the end goal.
Yeah. Yeah, brother, let me bring this to the topic of the day, which, we're actually talking about families, and there's one point right here that we'd be remiss if we didn't bring up. This is the intersection of accountability partners and family health. Folks, we talk about a lot of diseases that run in families. Some of them, like hypertension and diabetes, may actually run in families, but very often the more common reason for this is the fact that you have a common meal preparer at home that's feeding the entire family. So if you have an entire family that's rubbing down on all kind of fried foods, all types of processed foods, people that are adding salt to it without tasting the food beforehand, that is going to end up being more contributing to bad health outcomes than the genetic propensity, or it may even trigger the genetic propensity. If you have a family that walks around the block together, that plays frisbee or chases footballs or plays catch together outside, engage in family fitness. Find activities that you can use the family as your accountability partner for, that are fun, that are unifying, that create bonds. All of that works. And again in what we're discussing, whether it's diet, exercise, sleep, other such things, this stuff actually works. And, again, I love when we can drill these things down to phrases. And I think that Tory Logan, what gets measured gets done. As I said, objectify the conversation, plan it in advance, have specific goals, gamify it, hold yourself and your family accountable. You'll be much more likely to get there. If you're a butterfly just fluttering around hoping to find a flower to pollinate on, no, be a bull that's charging toward the red target. You'll get there.
So we've talked about setting goals and trying to find ways to incorporate all of this in our lives. What about at the end of the day? Is there a role for sleep, and how much sleep and the type of sleep that you're getting?
Yeah. Sleep. When I was younger, I used to joke that I wanted to be the guy that could function on 3.5 hours a day of sleep. And I actually was that guy for a long period of time until I learned better. I don't know how this happened. Maybe it was where the research was at some point in time, but we used to always talk about 8 hours of sleep a day. The data actually shows that it's about 7.2 hours per night of sleep that you actually should be getting. Your goal should be 7 hours a night of sleep. And there's actually good data that shows that if you sleep significantly more or significantly less than 7.2 hours a night, that actually reduces your life expectancy. Now, sleep by itself, I love the idea that I am so productive over the course of my day that I jump out of bed in the morning and I fall into bed at night. I want to have a full day, live my life emotionally, physically, all of that. But sleep is so important because it is the period of time in which your body recovers from your past day's activities, files memories and other things that you need for your mental stability, and prepares you for the upcoming day's activities. So if you forego sleep, you not only are shortening your life expectancy, but you are not putting yourself in the best position to do your best to benefit from what you did over the past day or to be prepared for the upcoming day. You must commit to getting good night's worth of sleep.
There's a lot of literature in our medical trainees uh, where we talk about how much activity that they do, how much work do they do at a given time, rest breaks, and the evidence is very, very clear that um, as a society, we don't do a very good job of our sleep regimen, our sleep hygiene. The challenges that I see a lot of people come to us. In fact, when I walk into their rooms, the hospital rooms, and we wake them up, we can see that they've got the telephone in their hand, and they fell asleep with the device, and they end up with very, very poor sleep hygiene. I find that many of the people, even if when they get the requisite hours, don't get to the REM sleep cycles because they spent time either consuming alcohol too close to the time they were sleeping or watching TV, or now everybody's consumed with screen time right before bedtime. And it doesn't let us shift our brains to the REM cycles. And so this is an ongoing concern. And as more and more of our lives shift to mobile devices, this is something that we and our children are really going to have to self-regulate.
Yeah, you just said a word. I like that phrase. I'm going to borrow that one, sleep etiquette. And there are a couple of additional considerations that people should be aware of. A lot of sleep disorders exist out there. People have problems falling asleep. And in our society, we always want to grab a pill. But there really are some self help, simple things that we can do to facilitate better sleep. As you know, Brother Dr. Narcisse, there's a thing called state dependent learning that could be applicable here. Folks, your bed is meant for sleep and for conjugal activity. Okay, it is not meant for you to be playing chess, checkers, playing with your cell phone, watching TV, and doing all other types of things. A very simple drug-free maneuver that you can engage in to improve the quality of your sleep is to only associate your bed with one of the activities that it's meant to do. And sleep is well, it's high on that list. So if you are ready to go to sleep when it's time for you to go to bed, odds are you'll have a more restful sleep. So just try that little one before you start trying to pop pills or other such things. Sleep is critically important, and we don't have the time to get into it. But the concept of ensuring you get a certain amount of REM cycles, or even wake up at the end of a full sleep cycle, are things that are very important in the grand scheme of things.
As we prepare our homes for the upcoming year, are there any are there health related devices, equipment that you think that every family should have?
Oh, whew. This is where I remind people that the number one cause of death between ages 1 and 44 um, are trauma-related incidences. Okay, motor vehicle crashes, fires in your house, falls. It's not heart attacks and strokes and drownings and other such things. It's actually unintentional accidents. Every home should have a smoke alarm. Every home should have a fire extinguisher. Every home should have a carbon monoxide detector. Every home should have an AED detector. Okay, these are things that if you don't have in your house, let's take inventory because these things literally save your life. And we talk about early detection for disease. Well, this is the analogy to that for unintentional, unintended accidents. If there's a fire going on in your house and you have a smoke detector and you can get out of that house in time, you saved your life. So these are things that you really have to be mindful of. You just have to be mindful. Take one day out of your life and just plan. And part of what the Surgeon General Initiative is going to be doing for our members, our communities, and subsequently the communities we serve is that we want to be providing some of this information to you so that it's easily accessible to you. We want to give you an inventory of things that you can have in your home or recognize in terms of stroke recognition, heart attack recognition, to save your life? That's such an important question, such an important concept. Try to take a little bit of time and literally think about how you would escape a fire in your house, what you need to help you escape that and many other things. So, I'll leave it there for now. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
I actually would. I would remind everybody that even if you have all these devices, that January is a great time to remind yourself this is the time to change the batteries.
Yes.
A lot of people have
Yeah.
smoke detectors in their home, and if it's been a couple of years since you've climbed on the ladder and changed out that 9 volt, if that's the kind you have, it's not hardwired, then it probably isn't going to be functional at the time when you need it. So this is the time of the year, and whether it's your birthday, the beginning of the year, Christmas, whatever trigger works for you, I actually just set it in my calendar, in my digital calendar, that this is the week. In fact, I use January, the first week of January. This is the week that I've got the ladder out, and I actually go around and change those batteries. So that's a key thing. As a hospitalist and an internist, I also think that everybody should have a blood pressure cuff that can monitor your heart rate. I think that waiting until you have high blood pressure is not the time to do those kinds of things. COVID has really taught many of us that how well we're breathing is something that's very, very important. Having access to a pulse oximeter is something that several years ago was not part of the vernacular in our community, but many people would benefit from that kind of thing. If you've got diabetes, you need to have a working glucometer and something that you can check regularly. Everybody should have a thermometer. And I agree with Brother Sterling. The leading cause, I would actually expand on his statistic. The leading cause of death around the world is diarrheal diseases. And so one of the things that we see very, very commonly is individuals who are very young or very, very old who end up in a place where they aren't eating and drinking that 64 ounces of water that Dr. Sterling was speaking to before, and end up in a place where they get into a lot of trouble. So I'm a big believer in having access to a thermometer. And now that the digital world has come along, having some kind of medical alert system. There are a number of members of my family who have developed diabetes, and I really encourage them in their wearables or in their phones to document that they have diabetes, so that when EMS arrives, if they're not able to speak for themselves, the EMS personnel can access the publicly available parts of their phone and see, oh, you have diabetes. Maybe your blood sugar is very, very low, and I need to take step A, step B, step C to try to work to try to help you. Our lives are so much more digital than they ever were before, and this proves so beneficial in so many different ways. But we talked about some ways that may not be. Before we close the hour, are there any other things that you would suggest in general or specific terms that really add to longevity, Buster?
Well, I think the common things happen commonly, and I think that I want to take a step back and co-sign what you said about having a blood pressure cuff at home for an additional reason. High blood pressure, which tends to run so high in African American communities. And oh, by the way, the audience should be aware that 42% of Americans are overweight, and another third, 33% or so, is obese. So you're talking 75% of our population that's obese. I bring that back up in the context of this conversation to say that hypertension is known as the silent killer. And what that means for you is that you won't even know that you have it until you are walking down the street one day and fall down dead from a stroke or a heart attack or some other such thing. So it is actually very important as a preventive measure to know when your blood pressure is higher than it needs to be, as a prompt for beginning certain lifestyle changes. Okay, the number that you want is somewhere around 115/75, and I guarantee you 90% of us, if we took our blood pressure right now, wouldn't see that. And you should be aware that if your blood pressure is too high, that means that your heart is having to work too hard to do what it does to deliver blood with its oxygen and nutrients around to the rest of your tissues, it's working. It's working harder than it needs to. And you don't want that to happen because eventually your heart is going to wear out. And once that happens, all types of things, bad things are going to happen. I do want to take a second and answer a few quick questions. I noticed that Artine Jones asked about less expensive um,
Wearables.
Apple Watches for what? Yeah, just go to Amazon. I guarantee you'll find something for under $125, $140. I wish you had asked that question back on Black Friday or such because everything was on sale. But yeah, you don't have to spend all the money Apple is trying to extract from us to make that happen. And similarly, to Junius Pettyjohn, you can get an AED detector from Walmart, Best Buy, Amazon. These things are pretty easy to access and not very inexpensive. Jeffrey Kemp had a question here that I just want to reaffirm. The long and short of it, when it comes to water, water is so essential for every activity that is occurring in your body. The biochemical reactions that allow us to move, to talk, to breathe, everything that is happening in your body is a result of water. Okay, everything you put in your mouth either helps or hurts you. If you're drinking soda, it contains calories, but it also contains a lot of chemicals and other substances that the body has to filter out. If you're drinking water, that's pure, straight from the source, straight to the source in your body. Um, I've actually just got done reviewing a lot of data about what the correct amount of water is. There's not a consensus on that, but we do know, and I can say this without equivocating, if you are drinking 64 ounces of water a day, there's no deleterious effects from your doing so. Whether it is the ideal number remains to be seen, but it is a great number to hang your hat on because your body just needs as much water as you can do without drowning yourself inside of it, which none of us are going to do without jumping in a swimming pool. Go ahead.
I'd like to just also remind everybody that as we close the top of the hour, that we'll be back in 2 weeks, January the 20th, to talk about dental health. We're coming to you today from the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated Surgeon General's Initiative under the leadership of President Lanza and the vision of Brother Dr. Sterling. I'd like to thank both of them for their contributions tonight and to the whole series. And most importantly, I'd like to thank all of those of you in the audience for coming and bringing all of your enthusiasm and your questions. It really, the enthusiasm is infectious, and you can see Brother Sterling getting ideas to go out and write his next book. If you haven't had a chance to hear about the 72-hour day, can you just one more time mention the title of your book that's coming out in 2 weeks?
Sure. The one you were referencing, and it's important to say that, people do ask me all the time, do I really think there's 72 hours in a day? The title actually refers to levels of productivity, not levels of work. Trust me, I don't work anywhere near 72, 24, or even 8 hours a day. I actually produce that amount of output. That's the goal, and we're talking about how to create efficiencies that allow you to be that level of productive. The book that's coming out on February 1st is Straight No Chaser Health. And it really asks and answers the questions, do you know how to do health? That's it. And it provides you with tips. It is impeccably resourced so that you can trust the information that's being provided to you. And it's meant to give you best practices to talk about both increasing the longevity of your life and allowing you to continue to maintain a high quality of your life. Because here's one piece of food for thought as we close. You don't know anybody that will ever have told you that the happiest day of their life was on a day while they were sick. We want to enjoy life, and health is a key component of that. So in closing, the one thing I want to leave you with is please take inventory of your health. If there is any such thing as a New Year's resolution, which Brother Dr. Narcisse and I both aren't particularly big on, I would actually say take today, forget New Year's, let's just say today is the best possible day for you to start taking inventory of your health, for you to make a commitment to get a primary care provider, for you to begin improving your diet, for you to begin engaging in activities. Take small bites of that elephant, and pretty soon, as you get more informed, as you become an educated consumer and a better steward of your own health care, you will find that the benefits are multiple and you will enjoy your life immeasurably without having to sacrifice much of what you at the beginning of this conversation might think you do. I thank you, I thank you, I thank you in the audience for participating. As always, I thank you, Brother Dr. Narcisse, for being such a stalwart as our Deputy Surgeon General for Family Health. We'll see you back in 2 weeks, and until then, be safe, be well, and thanks for joining us. Good night.
Good night.